Hi everybody, I'm Michael. In this video, I'll show off me making this oil painting of Eevee, the Pokemon character.
I took the pose from the title screen of Pokemon Let's Go Eevee. I asked a professional Bob Ross wildlife instructor to help me with the painting because painting wildlife usually involves specialty equipment that I don't have, like a sable brush or transparent paints. The instructor surprised me by saying, "None of that stuff is necessary here because Eevee is a cartoon character, so you don't have to try as hard to make Eevee look photorealistic." The first step is doing a light sketch of Eevee on the canvas with a yellow colored pencil. Since it's so light, it's easy to paint over the reference lines. The downside is that it's hard to see them. If I had known ahead of time, I would have printed out a large version of the reference photo so I could trace it onto the canvas with carbon paper. My sketch was not perfect. My Eevee was a little taller than the reference photo, and her ears are more rounded. It's definitely good for somebody who's never drawn a picture of Eevee before. With this painting, we do the background first. I covered the background with a thin layer of liquid white, which is typical for Bob Ross paintings. Then I paint in the sky blue, and I paint the ground with a dark color. I think it was mountain mixture. I used a fan brush to paint in the lollipop trees on the right and the rocks on the left. I used more paint on the side of the trees to make those sides darker. With the rocks, I mixed in some white to make a lighter shade of gray, which I used to separate the rocks. With the trees, I painted over them in green, then I made a yellow-green mixture, and I used that on the right side of the trees to make that side lighter. The tree trunks are brown, and again, I made the right side slightly lighter because that's the direction the sunlight is coming from in this particular painting. I brought up the ground because the trees were floating in midair. Since I had three 1-inch brushes, I decided to do the grass in 3 different shades of green. I already had 2 shades of green from the trees, so I whipped up a third shade of green with green and a different type of yellow. I did tappy grass, where you tap the edge of your brush against the canvas while going left and right, sort of like using a hammer to get paint on the canvas. You change the angle and the color to make little hills and to add interest, because it's kind of boring when the grass is all the exact same shade of green everywhere. Eevee's legs looked weird to me. In my reference photo, her legs are all together, but on my canvas, it looked like she had really thick legs. So I added more space between the front legs and the back legs. After that, I mixed the colors for the body, but you can't see that because my shoulder is in the way. You can see the instructor's painting on the right. She made a lot of bushes, where I did none. That's very much like a professional Bob Ross instructor. Eevee's body is basically 2 colors, brown and yellow. I mixed the correct shade of brown, I made a huge pile of it, same with the yellow. Before starting the body, I had to cover up the blank parts of the canvas with liquid white. It was a little scary because I was covering up the pencil marks I made at the start, but it's not that scary because you can clearly see where the edges of the body are. I did the outside of her ears and her face, which is basically a giant circle. Leave 2 circles for her eyes and a trapezoid for her mouth. If you don't know what trapezoids are, make her mouth a triangle. Then I covered her body and most of her tail with brown. It's mostly all the same shade of brown. I took the same brown and made a little bit of it slightly darker, which I used on the back legs because they're in shadow. I also used a little line of dark just to differentiate her butt from her tail. Because it's fur, you shouldn't paint it in any which way you please. You need to paint it in the direction that the fur grows. For example, with the body, you start with your brush on the front and you pull towards the back because that's how the fur grows. The fur on the front is over the fur on the back. I think that's right. I could be wrong about that. I took the yellow mixture, I painted the edge of her tail and her little muff. I painted the muff from top to bottom, because that's the direction the fur grows. Then I added the brown lines on the muff to separate the various puffy parts, and I smoothed out those lines. As usual for me, I spent a lot of time getting worried that there's a slight bit of canvas visible between Eevee and the background. It does look bad if she's got a white outline all around her body. Fortunately, Eevee's an animal, so you can easily add a little bit of brown to cover up the white edges. That just means she has a little more fur. I think what super professional artists do is paint the background, then wait a couple of days for the paint to dry before doing the animal in the foreground. That way, it's much easier to cover up the white lines. You don't have to worry about things like, uh-oh, I got some of the yellow in the blue sky. Now it's green. What do I do? I did the entire painting in a 2-hour sitting, so I did not have the luxury of having a dry background before doing the foreground. I filled in Eevee's ears with black as well as her eyes. In Let's Go Eevee, she has taller eyes with purple at the bottom. I changed my mind and did shorter, rounder eyes, which are all black. Like on Cinnamon. That's the name of our model on the right side of the screen. She was a great model. She never moved and didn't complain once. I think the shorter eyes look better. I did eyebrows, but they didn't look good, so I smoothed them out. The nose is a short line done in brown, easy to do. The mouth is red at the top and lighter red at the bottom. I should note that I used a smaller, thinner brush when doing fine details, like the edges of things. That way, if I make a mistake, it's easier to fix the mistake than if I used a fat brush. That's basically it for the painting. I spent about 5 minutes making sure the edges were good. It can be hard to tell what looks good and what doesn't when you're so close to the painting. I decided to add a Pokeball in the lower right because it was super easy. You do a circle in black with a smaller circle inside, paint the top red and the bottom white. I did have to do a few layers of white to make it bright enough. Then I signed my name and that's it. I had a painting of Eevee. I'm going to give it as a present to my daughter. I hope she likes it, and I hope you viewers like it too.